What's up, NBA fans? Welcome to episode 5 of the Wolves Wired podcast. I'm your host, Chetan Kolli, and I'm excited to bring you guys a special edition of Wolves Wired today. Joining me for this episode are two of my friends and fellow basketball enthusiasts, Shraavan and Sachin. Together, we're going to break down all the latest action from the NBA playoffs with a particular focus on the intense second round matchup between the Thunder Mavericks and, of course, the Timberwolves showdown with the Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference. Now that I've set the stage, let's dive right into the thick of this exhilarating playoff action. The Thunder Mavericks series was an absolute roller coaster ride, and I hate to bring it up since Shraavan is a huge Thunder fan, but that series ultimately ended with the Mavs winning 4-2. So before we jump into the Western Conference Finals matchup between the Wolves and the Mavs, I just want to get both of your biggest takeaways from the Thunder Mavs matchup and your overall opinions of why the Thunder ultimately fell short. So Shraavan, I'm going to start with you. The question I want to start off with is, in Game 6 of the Mavs Thunder series, there was a controversial foul call that might have swung the series towards the Mavs. Do you think that officiating throughout the series played a role in the Thunder's elimination?
First of all, thank you for having me
Yeah,
on, Jayden.
of course.
As far as your question's concerned, at the end of the day, like Shea admitted that he shouldn't have gone for the foul,
Mm-hmm.
and officiating is going to be good and bad for both teams. My takeaway was, the better team won, and I think the Thunder will like be better equipped for the future after this experience. I think players like J-Dub, Shea, and like Chet will all learn from this experience. I think next year we're hoping for a bigger run.
And then Sachin, to you, it's the same question. Just like based off of watching the series, even though you're not a Thunder fan, just getting an outside perspective from someone who's not like biased towards the team. Even though that was a great answer, Shraavan, what were your thoughts while you were watching the series as a whole?
Well, I just couldn't believe that Derek Jones Jr. was shooting the ball so well. Like I would have thought if Kyrie was playing that passively, that there would be no way for the Mavericks to win the series. But I guess the role players really stepped up. Also Lively, as a rookie, doing that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and then even like PJ Washington too, like he was making almost every single corner three that he was making. And then like we all watched the first game of the Wolves Mav series, and then you saw like both of them kind of just playing how they normally play, and like they weren't making everything. So it was just kind of crazy to see how the role players, even though like usually people say role players play at home better, it was kind of interesting to see how both of them stepped up even when they were playing in away games. And then back to you, Shraavan. What do you think the key factors, like specifically, that were what led to the Thunder's downfall against the Mavs? Like I know that Shea played very well, but apart from him, like what did you take away from the series?
I mean, after this series, there's no doubt that Shea is a superstar. He was the best player in that series, and there's no doubt about it. I think it came down to like rebounding and like the way that we left like PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., and occasionally Josh Green open at three. It led to us being down early and often throughout the series. Because like since game one we won by 25,
Mm-hmm.
and we put them to sleep very early. But from there, it felt like the Thunder were just playing from behind. Like games 2 through 5, like the lead kept oscillating from 5 to 10. I just feel like against a team that has Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, you can't get down too early because they're gonna put you away. And in Game 6, obviously we squandered a 16-point lead, and it was definitely hard to watch the way it ended. Obviously, I don't want my team season ending on PJ Washington making free throws, but yeah, other than that, I think those are the reasons. And again, this will be a good learning experience for everyone on the Thunder.
Yeah, especially because the Thunder are super young. And then Sachin, back to you. Shraavan brought up like a pretty interesting point of rebounding. Just we're gonna talk about this towards the end of the podcast, but do you think that the Thunder need to make some roster changes in order to get a little bit of more size to pair up with Chet? Is that something you think would help them to make a deeper playoff run?
Yeah, I mean they don't have they have Chet, but he's not an aggressive rebounder. They
Mm-hmm.
probably need a big. Honestly, the Mavericks, when they traded for Gafford at the deadline, that's
Yeah.
probably something the Thunder should have done. That's exactly the type of player they needed. I remember in the regular season there was a Lakers Thunder game, and it was really obvious that the Thunder needed a center. They were just getting eaten up on the boards, and it just happened again in the playoffs. So yeah, they
Yeah,
should probably look to improve, especially with all the draft capital they have. They definitely can.
yeah, especially in the playoffs because they were giving up. When I was watching the games, they're giving up a lot of offensive rebounds, and that's not something you really want. You kind of want teams to just take their one shot and then go back on the offensive end on your side. So that's also something I saw as well. And going on after a grueling battle against the Thunder, the Mavericks are now set their sights on an even tougher test. The dynamic and talented third seed Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference. The highly anticipated series between the Wolves and the Mavs started yesterday night, and all three of us actually watched the game together. And game one did not disappoint at all. The final score, unfortunately, didn't go the way I wanted it to. The Wolves ended up losing 108 to 105, where the Mavs were able to steal game one on the road. So something I kind of wanted to ask both of you guys is that Luka and Kyrie, they combined for 63 points in game one, and that's kind of what they should be doing because they're both really dynamic offensive players. But what defensive breakdowns did you see from the Wolves that allowed both of them to have such dominant games, especially for the Wolves being known to have like the number one defense in the league? Well, anyone you can go.
So I just thought, like, at least in the fourth quarter, it was pretty obvious that they were gassed. At least Ant for sure, because he had to step up on Kyrie as well as burden like a bunch of the offensive load. So they should find a way to maybe get Ant some help on defense because they obviously need the offense. And I
Yeah,
also
and
noticed
then
that they were running some drop coverage on
yeah,
Kyrie, which probably should not be the move that they should use.
yeah, that's a huge thing. And then Shraavan, to you, I know you mentioned this yesterday. I asked you, I said that why don't they put Ant on Luka? So why do you think that's not the best idea for the Wolves to do, especially because you saw Ant get so tired throughout the series chasing Kyrie around?
Well, I mean, if he guards Luka, Luka's gonna back him down, and we all see that Luka is able to draw fouls at a pretty high rate. So
Mm-hmm.
the last thing you want is your best player on the court getting into foul trouble because of like Luka like selling a call. I mean, last series we saw Gobert and Towns getting into foul trouble.
Yeah.
With Jokic. I also want to. You were asking about like the defensive breakdowns.
Mm-hmm.
I think it came down to like the ending of the first half was what like kind of screwed the Wolves. It was 62-54. They let up a two, and then Ant has the ball, and he makes a careless pass,
Yeah.
and they let Kyrie go downhill on that last play, and he got an and one. So an 8-point lead turns into a 3-point lead. And you saw game four in the Nuggets series, like when they had that massive 8-point swing, and then ultimately they lost by 8 points.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for like the Wolves to close quarters. Game seven, they did that in the second half effortlessly, and that's why they're in this position they are now. So I think like an emphasis for them is to be like those last 2 minutes matter a lot and finish as much as you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a great point because they did the same exact thing, like you said, when Jamal Murray hit that half court shot and they were down 7, but just in 30 seconds they let up 8 points. So that's kind of what costed them the game. So Chris Finch has been on them about that. Watched some of his interviews today, especially during practice, and he was saying that he hounded them on closing quarters. And then another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is the difference in play of Kyrie from the Thunder series to game one of this series. So in the Thunder series, when I was watching, I kind of saw Kyrie take a backseat to Luka. I don't know if that was more of the defense played by the Thunder, but he was more of a primary playmaker. So I just want to see, like, kind of understand from your guys' perspective, why do you think what helped Kyrie like play more aggressive and like get to his spots even easier during this game?
I'll go
So
first. Yeah, so I think that like in the Thunder series, we saw PJ Washington and those guys in the corner open all the time. So he played really well that series. I think like he kept the ball moving and he got all those guys their open shots. On top of that, like he could always like find Gafford or Derek Lively for a lob, especially Derek Lively. I mean, you look at the stats, like when he's on the floor, the Mavs are a scary, scary team compared to when Gafford's on the floor. But I think like yeah, this series of Kyrie is able to play more freely. And I think the Wolves are like a better like they're able to guard the shooters better than the Thunder. So that allowed Kyrie to go more downhill in the first half. Second half, he was kind of like non-existent, I'd say. That's when Luka took over and did his job.
Yeah. Sachin, how about your thoughts on that?
So from the Thunder series, it looked like they were at least a bit double teaming him like as soon as he passed half court, which is not what the Wolves did. But I think if Kyrie gets downhill, I mean, you could see it in the first half. He was trying to push transition buckets like the whole half. I think if you get him in transition, it's going to be tough to stop. So maybe they'll take some inspiration from the Thunder and start doubling.
Yeah, that's something I saw too, is that I think Ant kind of wanted to take the challenge of playing Kyrie one-on-one more rather than like he fully called him out after game 7. So I think he tried to take that challenge upon himself. But when you're guarding players who make tough shots like that, it's going to be hard. You kind of have to throw multiple people at them to like kind of just like confuse them a little bit. So that's exactly true. And then my last question about, oh yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I just wanted to add like I just thought about this, but like you could see the shift in defensive pressure from the last series to this series. I mean, last series the focus on Nikola Jokic, so got Gobert and Towns are like the primary defenders, but now we're shifting towards like it's now the focus is on Kyrie and Luka. So guys like Ant, Nikhil Alexander Walker and Jaden McDaniels, like they're gonna have to play a vital role in stopping them if they want to have any chance of making their first ever NBA Finals.
Yeah, exactly. And then just the last question about this series is we saw Ant and Cat, they didn't have the best game. They shot a combined of 12 of 36 from the field. So I just kind of wanted to know what factors do you think contributed to the Wolves star duo having such an inefficient shooting night? And more specifically, the Wolves attempted a season high, like 49 3-pointers. That's a season high during the regular season and even in the postseason. And they're not known for like taking too many threes. And Ant in particular attempted a whopping, I think it was 10 threes, and only 4 of his field goal attempts came from within the paint. And that's kind of crazy to me because throughout the league, Ant's known to be one of the best downhill drivers at the basket and the best at finishing in the rim. So what do you guys think the Mavs did to kind of force the Wolves to shoot from the perimeter and not get their easy looks at the rim?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, it was partially because of being gassed. It's just easier to settle and take a three than to always continue slashing as Ant does. But to take a season high amount of threes is not a good strategy. I think next game, Cat and Ant will be much more aggressive for sure. And there'll be a higher tick of like paint points.
Yeah, because the paint differential between both teams was around like it was like 62 to 34 or something like that. And usually the Wolves are the ones who are winning the paint battle. So Shraavan, did you see anything particular that the Mavs defense did to kind of stop Ant and Cat like forcing themselves in the paint?
I think having the presence of like Derek Lively definitely plays like a little bit of an impact, but I think Ant just settled way too much last game, and you could just tell like he was like enjoying the moment, but he was just taking some questionable shots. Like I thought he was taking way too many threes. It's like a couple dribble up threes is nice, but yeah, Ant is known for like driving to the rim and finishing on the rim. As far as Cat is concerned, I think like he just like he plays better when he's focused. There were times where I felt like he was on the court but not actually on the court. But in the fourth quarter, we like after I criticized him while we were watching it like together, he stepped up in that fourth quarter. Obviously, that basket interference, like you can't really knock him for that. Like that's just like he made the judgment. Like it was just off by a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you saw in the fourth quarter, like when he took that fadeaway, he made it, and then he's an underrated playmaker. He got Gobert on a pick and rolls like alley oop, and he made a clutch three. But I think it's just like I think Ant needs to step up more. I mean, I understand their gas, but this is the conference finals. You need to win every game against teams like the Mavs.
Yeah, exactly. And Ant says all the time that he wants to be known as like one of the best two-way players in the league. So I also agree that he's been playing great throughout the postseason, but there are instances like you could see the 22-year-old of him like kind of come out where he makes the careless passes, and you could just tell he doesn't have as much experience. But I feel like he could definitely step it up. He has the competitive mindset to do that. And then moving on, so while the Wolves battle the Mavs and this series continues, I want to shift our focus back to the Thunder, since Shraavan's such a big Thunder fan, and kind of talk about the Thunder's outlook for the offseason, just like touch on it a little bit. So this young and talented team, they had a very impressive playoff run, and they had a very impressive regular season getting the first seed. So that was something that was very surprising to almost all NBA fans, but they have some tough decisions that are lying ahead in the offseason regarding some of their core pieces like Josh Giddey and Dort. So, Shraavan, I want to start with you. Do you think the Thunder should move on from Giddey after his struggles this season, or does his potential as a playmaker next to SGA kind of warrant the Thunder from keeping him in the roster?
I think they have to keep all options open with Josh Giddey. I mean, we all saw it. Like, he looked scared out there. Like, he looked like me when I played volleyball a few years back. Like, when I didn't want to get that ball. Like, that's how he looked like. Like, he just, like, when he got the ball, he didn't know what to do with it. And, like, it felt like whenever he shot, it felt forced. But, I mean, if we have to trade Dort and, like, if we have to trade Dort and Giddey, like, as long as it improves the team, I'm okay for it. Like, I remember when Dort was an undrafted free agent, and, like, he came in 2019-2020 season, and he locked James Harden down until Harden got that block in the bubble. And, like, I always admired him for being the heart and soul one of the heart and soul of the Thunder. But I do think, like, he was selling a little too much on these calls in the playoffs, especially against the Mavs. Felt like every time he went for a screen, he was diving. And, like, we knew that the refs weren't really going to call it, so that caused a lot of defensive breakdowns. Mm-hmm. But again, if it makes the team better, then I'm all for the move. I definitely don't want Gordon Hayward back. Like, he showed no signs of accountability at the end. Like, that was one of the, like, Presti's biggest misses, and I can't wait to tell him goodbye.
Yeah, they thought they would bring him in as a veteran presence, but that really didn't end up working out. Going to you, Sachin, just as someone again who just watches the Thunder from like an outside perspective and doesn't have like a true connection to any of the players, do you personally believe that they should ultimately move on from Giddey and try to find maybe another big man or someone to place along Chet or SGA?
I just don't understand what position like Giddey really plays, because his shot is not great. He's not like super athletic, so he's kind of stuck in a spot where it might be like better for the Thunder to move on from him, and either like I know like Case and Wallace could fit like the Dort role, or maybe he could slot in for the Giddey replacement. And they have enough draft capital to get a Giddey replacement, so I think they should look into trading him. Maybe just keep him, because I don't know what value they could get for him right now. It might just be in their best interest to see if he could provide something off the bench, or in the offseason he just gets better.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, like when he was playing along SGA, like Giddey's like natural position is a point guard. In my opinion, that's kind of what he's known for. So SGA kind of took that role, and then you kind of saw Josh Giddey playing more of like a spot up shooter in the corner, especially against the Mavs series. They were like daring him to shoot. So I don't really see him in that sense fitting for the team, but overall it's going to be pretty interesting to see what the Thunder do, because the Thunder have really, really smart people in their front office, like Sam Presti, and even Mark Daigneault, your head coach, is like he's also really good at kind of picking up people and placing them on the roster, and people that kind of just fill holes in the roster. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the Thunder do in the offseason. So just any closing thoughts between any of you two, just about the Thunder in general and what they should do in the offseason, or are we good with that?
I think the main thing is like either Josh Giddey leaves or he like works on his game. I think everything that went on this season, like it definitely showed on the court. Like, because there were times he just like he looked like he didn't belong there. But like we've seen the highs of Giddey, and like if he works on his game, and like in the chance we keep him and he works on his game, then we could finally see like the true version of him. But if not, then we have to move on. But I just don't want the Thunder to stay pat. I think there are a lot of like holes we have to fill. I mean, it was nice that we got the 1 seed, but obviously we didn't make it to where we wanted to get to. So I just don't want us to like sit there and like not make moves and be content.
Yeah. And then just like Sachin said before, like about Cason Wallace, I think that he can be someone that could maybe fill that role of Josh Giddey. And even if they do decide to move away from Lou Dort, even though he's been like the heart and soul of the team, I feel like he can perfectly just insert himself into the lineup, just taking that Dort place. And in my opinion, I think Cason Wallace has a little bit more potential, especially as a shooter. So I feel like the Thunder have a lot of options, especially like Sachin said, like they have a lot of draft capital. So they can definitely do something in the offseason to fill some holes in their roster. So sadly, that's all the time we have for today. But it was an absolutely electric roundtable discussion with both of you, breaking down the latest playoff action and some offseason moves. A huge thanks to both of you, Shraavan and Sachin, for joining me and bringing some very insightful analysis and passionate takes. To our listeners, thanks as always for tuning in and being a part of this journey with me. As we get closer to the NBA Finals, hopefully the Wolves make it. I'll keep bringing you guys comprehensive coverage no matter what, right here on the Wolves Wired podcast. Until next time, and this is your host, Chetan Kolli, signing off.